Hello to each and every one of you who has come to hear and see Mémoire Vivante, an appointment with Marguerite Bourgeoys. How good it is on this October 7th, the feast day of Our Lady of the Rosary, to find ourselves together in this chapel. On October 7th, 1643, during a procession to Our Lady of the Rosary, Marguerite was overwhelmed by the sight of a statue of Mary. This touch led her to give her life to God and to others in the spirit of the Virgin Mary's visitation. Today's events remind us that Marguerite Bourgeoys saw prayer as meaningful only if it gave rise to dialogue, not recitation, leading to action. The whole life of the foundress of the Congrégation de Notre-Dame consisted in putting in place, against all odds, measures promoting the education of citizens, the embodiment of her love of neighbor, flowing from her love of God. And today, she continues to invite us to make this goal a reality in our own way. Enjoy the conference. Who could describe the soul of Montreal? Who could analyze the DNA of this metropolis, where the lives of so many descendants, heirs to a history of weaving and cross-weaving, intertwine? From the first peoples to inhabit these territories, to the 11 indigenous nations present here today, settlers and immigrants over the centuries, French, English, Irish, Jews, Italians, Germans, Poles, Greeks, Portuguese, Haitians, Latin Americans, and South Americans, Congolese, Ivorians, Beninese, Egyptians, Lebanese, Moroccans, Algerians. I could go on and on. And I certainly have forgotten some. As we say, je me souviens, I remember. I remember every day crossing paths with this multiracial metropolis. We are so different, yet united by the moving that characterizes our stories. Nomadic peoples, immigrant peoples, refugees. We are wanderers. Here, we are pilgrims who have chosen to live and work on an island, as if to embrace the open sea. baptized, we baptized at Chuchake by the Kamnian Kehakaka people and Munyang and Ashinapeke. Then Ville-Marie by the French. This metropolis radiates talent and innovation around the world. Who really knows what is the motto of Montreal? It is Concordia Salus, salvation through harmony. In our city of diversity, what unites us? Is there a unique spirit here in Montreal? A particular vision? A particular audacity? Who could tell us? Who could tell us? Perhaps a woman. Bold, visionary. Marguerite. She is from yesterday, but she could be from today. She has passed into history, but her footsteps continue to mingle with mine. She is timeless, yet she marks my time. A woman of faith, a woman of passion. Marguerite comes and goes in the chapters of my own life, as does Jeanne Mance. In fact, it reminds me of a shadow that draws me after her and watches over me. Marguerite, you didn't come here to found the church. Quite the contrary. You came to follow Christ and to lay the foundations for a reign of peace, harmony, and equality. You came because your faith moved you, crossing the ocean 7 times. And today, me, here in my province of Quebec, in my church in Montreal, with my faith as small as a mustard seed, I have an ocean of questions. Margaret, Ville-Marie's first teacher, mother of the Filles du Roi, foundress of the Congrégation of Notre-Dame. What do you have to tell us about your story, our history, your history, about yourself and about ourselves? 2017 marked the 375th anniversary of the founding of Ville-Marie. Looking back, I was moved when I realized that I was about the same age as the founders. They were in their 20s and in their 30s. Jérôme Leroyer de la Dauversière, Jeanne Mance, Paul Deschaumédé, Sieur de Maisonneuve, and Marguerite Bourgeoys. In the 17th century France, they planned to leave everything behind to live an ideal of community. But what was happening in France at that time that gave rise to the desire to found or refound a society elsewhere? Well, then let's ask Denis, our archivist, to take us on a journey.
Sure, Sabrina. Let's go and travel. We'll travel with an exceptional woman, a woman who's a jewel. And Marguerite, in Greek, it's Margaritas. In Latin, Margarita. What does it mean? A pearl. Marguerite Bourgeoys is the pearl of New France. So we find her in that 17th century France in the 1600s. France in the 1600s is the Grand Siècle, is Louis XIV's France. It's a country of 20 million French people. At the time, England has 5 million inhabitants, Spain 8 million. So France has great, enormous ambitions, commercial ambitions. It intends to be part of the world market. It has architectural ambitions, the castle in Versailles, from Mansart, the Hall of Mirrors, an exceptional artistic realization by Charles Lebrun, and scientific realizations as well. The discourse of the method by Descartes, it is the beginning of science, a science based on research, on facts, and not only on the supernatural. It is the France of musical realizations, literary realizations, Molière, Racine, La Fontaine. And finally, it is a country that is looking for excellence, that is trying to grow, not only for lay and secular issues, but it's also the same thing in the Church of France. The 17th century Church in France has a lot of work to do. It needs to improve. Out of 20 million French people, 2 million went into the Protestant Reformation. They left the Catholic Church. This is the sign that something is not working. So you need to correct yourselves. You need well-educated priests who will be present to the faithful. It's essential for the people to trust them. This is also a church where the lay people are much more involved in the life of the church, men, but also women. So all of this will be set in place. Let me give you 3 examples. The Visite Andine, founded by François de Sales and Saint Jean de Chantal. The Daughters of Charity of Saint Vincent de Paul and Louise de Marillac, and also the Sulpicians, who are training people who are worthy of the name. So they are working towards a completely renewed church.
So this group that is going to shape the origins of Montreal, how did they manage to make this project work?
Well, the project is born with a man who decides, while being a layman, Jérôme Leroyer la Dauversière, he decides to get involved actively in the life of the church. So Jérôme Leroyer de la Dauversière was a tax collector. He was a head of a family, and he wanted to be deeply involved in the church, and he's the one who founded the Hospitallers of St. Joseph, who will come here and for the Hôtel Dieu, but he knows the Jesuits and their mission in Canada. So he will set up this project of Ville-Marie for the conversion of the Aboriginals. And for this, he will bring together in Paris aristocrats, bourgeois, women and men. And for instance, Pierre Chevrier, the Baron de Fancan, we see his portrait here, and this man will put his fortune in the service of this project. So these men are launching a new venture. So it's de Maisonneuve and Jeanne Mans who will lead the project in Montreal. So this is launched, but the first 10 years from 1642 to 1653 are quite difficult. And the 50 or so people who are there in 1653 are contemplating going back to France. But fortunately, Jeanne Mans will find some money, and they will go and bring back about 100 people, la grande recrue. They will be coming to Ville-Marie, and at this point, the project is saved. In 1653, among the 100 people, Marguerite Bourgeoys, who was chosen to be the first school teacher in Ville-Marie. Why is she coming here? She was living in Troyes. She had a good life over there. It's because she has a project. She intends to found a congregation of sisters who aren't cloistered and who can go and teach wherever they're needed.
Well, the story of our quartet is quite diverse. Jeanne, Jérôme, and Paul are lay people. Jérôme will never see Ville-Marie. Jeanne and Paul landed together in 1642, but Marguerite was not on that first voyage. And her story is somewhat detached from that of the others, as she has her own plans for education and religious life, apostolic religious life, because religious life, as she knew it in France, didn't really correspond to what she wanted. In her community there, she was in a contemplative community, and she kept dreaming of having an apostolate and a new form of religious life. This was quite daring, wasn't she?
Extremely audacious. She's part of the Catholic Reformation with its own and her own spirituality. It's quite a challenge. Her spirituality is all around the love of God, embodied in the love for the neighbor, and made concrete in education. She intends to be part of a new society where education will be offered to everyone. It is an immense challenge.
So Marguerite arrives in 1653. I imagine, I mean, she won't open a classroom right away. She didn't. What will she have to do to set up her school project?
People said about Marguerite Bourgeoys that when she came here, she had practically no luggage. It's true, but I will tell you that her social, spiritual baggage was so important that she needed to go back to France 3 times to bring all of it back. For instance, in 1658, she finally opens her school, and then she leaves to go to France to recruit her first companions, Catherine Crollo, Edmé Châtel, Marie Raisin, and Anne Yu. So it's good to remember these 4 names. This is the very first group of teachers in Montreal, and they were trained in Troyes, just like Marguerite Bourgeoys, except for Anne Yu. They are women of the Grand Siècle. They're liberal, they're open-minded, and they have an innovative pedagogy. They come with their school books that will be guiding their revolutionary practice of teaching.
Well, really, what is it that makes this very specific characteristic about this pedagogical approach?
Everything is original in this new approach. What?
Hold it. I have to go to the board over here and see, because I'm a student, see? I'm listening.
So teaching is offered to the girls. Girls are treated on the same footing as boys. And then school is free, so that all families, whatever their financial resources, can send their children to school. The school program is a symbol. They're teaching prayer, of course, but also reading, writing, and arithmetic. And small trades are also taught, like sewing, weaving. It is the beginning of the trade schools, and the method is also new. The children are regrouped by grades, and for the first time you have classrooms. The teachers are, well, Sabrina, you're an excellent pupil. The teachers are providing collective teaching so they can receive more children. And the teachers are also working in twos. They're helping one another, supporting one another. And the parents are considered as partners in education because you want to earn their trust. And all in all, this pedagogy is based on love and respect for the children. So you won't ever consider children like small adults anymore. They're considered as a specific age with specific needs. With such a philosophy, there is no corporal punishment. This is quite modern as an approach. Throughout the 1660s, the Montreal School is a great success. The parents are satisfied. The authorities are also happy with it. So Marguerite Bourgeoys says the time has come to go back to France again to obtain the royal approval that is necessary to create a congregation like the one she has in mind. So she will meet with Maisonneuve in Paris, who will help her to get the patent letters, the document, the civil document that will recognize the congregation. This document is absolutely unbelievable. It is a foundational document that is stating that education will be provided for girls, that it will be free, and that there will be professional teaching women to teach the young children. Marguerite Bourgeoys takes this opportunity to recruit other persons around her: Madeleine Constantin, Claude Durand, Marguerite Soliard, Geneviève Dieu-Rozoy, Élisabeth de la Bertache, Perrette Laurent de Bon, we need to keep these names in mind. They are pioneers, they're opening the way, and they will create, apart from the school in Montreal, a network of schools all along the St. Lawrence River. They're opening schools in Lachine, in Pointe-aux-Trembles, in Batiscan, in Champlain, in Quebec City, and on l'île d'Orléans.
You know, I wanted to say something today. I'm going to introduce you Marguerite, Quebec's first Minister of Education.
Louis, by the grace of God, King of France and Navarre, to all present and future, greetings. Our beloved Marguerite Bourgeoys, a native of our town of Troyes in Champagne, has humbly informed us that it has long pleased God to inspire in her the desire to advance the Catholic faith through the proper instruction of people of her sex, both natives and French in New France. She arrived in 1653, settling on the island of Montreal with a few other associate girls living in community. She taught the girls all the trades that would enable them to earn a living free of charge. And with such happy progress, thanks to the continual graces of divine providence, that neither she nor her associates are in any way a burden on the country. So you said it, Sabrina. Marguerite Bourgeoys was the Minister of Education. Yes, it's a fact. On the facade of the Quebec National Assembly, you have the statue of Marguerite Bourgeoys. She's presenting her project for society. In her right hand, she holds a cross, a symbol of her faith and her love for the neighbor. And in the left hand, she holds a book with the word education. For her, it's not only about educating the children, it's also the education of the adults, the young women coming from France. Starting in 1663, the congregation will welcome the Filles du Roi, who came to found families. These young women know nothing about the St. Lawrence Valley. They will be initiated to a new living condition. It's a question of survival for them. So they will be presented with values of personal growth and sharing that will be passing on to their children.
This is an education that we could really call really a holistic education that they received. But, you know, we heard all kinds of things about les Filles du Roi through the course of history. Well, where they were orphans, filles de joie, young women left to fend for themselves.
See, the urban legend is quite strong in this respect, but let me confirm to you they are indeed orphans, and the historians have made a decision about that. So let me continue. Marguerite Bourgeoys and her companions are opening their doors to many other people. Sometimes, in the aftermath of the Iroquois attacks, you have children without parents. It's the situation in Lachine in 1689. These orphans are taken in charge by the congregation. At other times, women or children were subjected to violence. They are immediately finding a refuge at the congregation. So the first orphanage, the first shelter for abused women and children. Other cases, the elderly settlers who can no longer support themselves. So the congregation becomes a home for the last stage of their lives. This is the first establishment for long-term care. Later, you will have women from New England. They were taken captives by the Aboriginals who were allied with the French. Marguerite Bourgeoys will say that the congregation's residence is much more than a school. It's the house of the Blessed Virgin, a place of mutual aid and love of neighbor. A very broad definition of education. So we are preparing women that can affirm themselves, protect themselves, and taking their place in the new society of New France.
And so Marguerite left France, but she also left a model of contemplative cloistered life in order to unfold here her own vision of an apostolic community sent out into the world. But practically speaking, in the life of the sisters and the rules of the community, how did things work?
In Marguerite's spirit, her congregation will be a community inspired by the life of the early Christians. After the royal recognition that was presented here by Louis XIV in person, the approval by the Bishop of Quebec City will happen only in 1698. Let's remember that Marguerite is dying in 1700. So this will be a hard-fought battle at a time when religious life for women necessarily means living within the four walls of a cloister. Marguerite wants a congregation of teaching women that are free to move wherever they're called. And she wants simple vows that can be renewed every year and not solemn vows that will be final.
Well, that's 45 years of struggle to get recognition of her congregation, because she came in 1653 and this official recognition. What is it that there was this struggle? What was the cause?
It's the question of the constitutions, and the main actor is Monseigneur de Saint-Vallier, the Bishop of Quebec City and New France, who comes to Montreal in the summer of 1694 and tells the sisters of the congregation that he has a gift for them. He is bringing them a project of constitutions that they didn't ask for. And these constitutions say that they will take solemn vows, that they will need to pay a dowry to join the congregation, that they will live as much as possible within their houses, and they will create a class of converse sisters to serve the teaching sisters, and that they will take a special vow of obedience to the bishop. The proposal is, in fact, a Greek gift.
Oh my God, the horse of Troy, from Troy.
It's obvious that Monseigneur de Saint-Vallier is preparing cloistered life for the Congregation of Notre-Dame. The sisters object, but in their own way, by using very high titles, Excellence and Reverend Father, but still they are determined. They refuse the idea of a dowry that will limit the accession to the congregation, and they insist on being all equal with one another. So you can't have better democracy. Marguerite Bourgeoys will be quite explicit in this respect when she will write that the sister working in the kitchen, if she has the talent, could become the superior. And that the superior, in term, when her term is over, could go and work in the kitchen. So that's democracy. To counter the vision of a conservative bishop who is contrary to a larger role of women in the church, Marguerite will turn to an ally and a friend. He's Louis Tronçon, the superior of the Sulpicians in Paris. So he will intervene with the Bishop of Quebec to ask him to be more flexible, and that's how the battle is won. The vows will be simple. There will be a dowry, but according to the possibilities of the families, the right to move freely will be maintained, and no special vow of obedience to the bishop. But as for the converse sisters, they will need to accept a compromise and accept that there are servant sisters. But in June 1698, the Congrégation de Notre-Dame made its first public profession of vows in Montreal. The Quebec City Sisters will do the same on August the 4th. The foundations are now laid for a congregation that will continue to carry out its educational mission up to this day, and that will count from Marguerite Bourgeoys to this day over 7,250 members.
Well, that's wonderful, Marguerite. Bravo. Marguerite was a woman who was unstoppable. She succeeded at everything she did. It's unbelievable. However, I can't help but want to pierce the secret to know what it is that sustained her passion, her inner fire. What was her intimate spirituality? And a strange question lingers in my mind. Throughout the adventure of her life in Ville-Marie, did Marguerite ever have or experience a great disappointment?
Yes, indeed. In a few words, an immense sorrow, the fire of the Mother House in 1683, where the sisters are losing two of their companions who died in the fire. Among the deceptions, the disillusions, it's probably the Marguerite Tardy affair, and it's something quite strange. On November 3, 1689, a sister of the congregation, Marguerite Tardy, tells Marguerite Bourgeoys that she is in a state of mortal sin, Marguerite, and that she doesn't have anymore the moral authority to hold the position of superior of the congregation. So Sister Tardy received this revelation from a message communicated to her by another sister who had died recently. So Marguerite doesn't flinch. She's convinced that all of it is the ramblings of a disturbed mind. But on January 3rd, 1690, Marguerite Tardy comes back, saying that her voices from beyond the grave insist that the superior handing her resignation. Marguerite Bourgeoys has to face the facts. She's the target of an attempted coup. And it's quite serious. As a matter of fact, Marguerite Tardy is in league with three Montreal Sulpicians who are planning to take the control of the three religious congregations of the city. It's quite a shock. Marguerite Bourgeoys would never have imagined that she would be attacked about her spiritual life. But in spite of all, she needs to get organized, plan her defense. She'll do that with the other two religious leaders, and they will turn to Louis Tronçon, whom we met earlier. The Tronçon, after being informed of all the details of the subversive maneuver, will have the visionary sister and her accomplices go back to France. And she told one of them, Guillaume Bailly, before you come back, if you would avoid playing with the ramblings of the visionary sister, you would be only charitable for her. In March 1692, Louis Tronçon sent word that Joseph de la Colombière had left the Sulpician order and that Marguerite Tardy would not be returning to Montreal. And he writes, and I quote, Marguerite Tardy has returned to her native region, and God grant that she may remain there. He had a sense of humor, Louis Tronçon, and he adds, tell Sister Bourgeoys that God's will are not being expressed through voices from the world of the dead. In the summer of 1693, Marguerite Bourgeoys tendered her resignation as superior. She's now 73 years old. All of this has certainly exhausted her, and she prefers to hand it over to a younger sister.
It's hard to hold on when someone is hurt and wounded in that way. It certainly wasn't easy. She must have needed someone very strong, a rock, people in whom she might be able to hold on to. Who was this network?
As we've seen, among the religious men and women and the lay people, she has supports everywhere, and she has a gift to develop good contacts with the people around there. But the source of her comfort and support is from the one who has been her inspiration for such a long time. It's Mary. The Mother of Christ is a model of women who intend to play an active role in the society and in the church. In her writings, she reminds us that Mary was a woman of action. She was not cloistered. She taught in the temple. Her presence was essential for the realization of her son's mission. She was present on the Calvary at the foot of the cross, while the apostles had left Christ, except for John, and she's the one who brings them together at Pentecost to launch the apostolic mission of the church. Marguerite Bourgeoys will make Virgin Mary the first superior of her congregation, will compare the sisters of the congregation to the apostles.
Why not? You know, even 400 years later, we're still struggling to try and imagine the audacity of the role of women in the church. They were the first witnesses to the resurrection. Marguerite could inspire us once again.
The apostles were sent in the name of our Lord, and they worked wonders. The sisters of the congregation are sent under the protection of the Blessed Virgin to teach school, and they instruct girls as though they were very learned. The apostle went out to all parts of the world. The sisters of the congregation are ready to go anywhere they are sent in this country. The apostle taught without charge. For that, they were content with very little and deprived themselves of everything. The sisters of the congregation live poorly wherever they are. The apostle preached the gospel. The sisters of the congregation must teach it by following its maxims and showing an example of modesty, prudence, and humility.
Wonderful, this text. Wonderful. It tells so much. It's so modern. The humble Marguerite is also a woman of great pride and ambition, and both things go together. And she's a woman of partnership, of bridge building. At the heart of her faith, there is a vision of equal dignity between women and men for the service of the church. This is at the heart of her faith.
You know, sometimes I wonder, Denis, has Quebec forgotten its religious history? Between what we've heard and the portrait we have just seen, whether it be on the media side, on politics or nothing, we just don't seem to be able to identify it with it anymore. The church at the beginning of the colony was sometimes a failure, but how do you reconcile all of this with more triumphant movements that followed? You know, I can't be a Christian today and ignore the more painful past of Christian churches in Canada. You know, I'm thinking in particular of the abuse that affected generations of Indigenous children within a colonialism that we still continue to go on. The fact that the founders of Ville-Marie came to convert the natives as if that would have set the stage for future assimilation?
This is a very current issue, and Marguerite Bourgeoys is shedding some light on it. As we revisit her work, we keep discovering the relevance of her judgments. One of the most remarkable examples today is her relationship with the First Nations. Very early on, she was one of the first to understand that the Europeanization of the indigenous people was a mistake. She had seen the failure of the Ursuline sisters in Quebec City on this level, and she concluded that it was necessary to approach the First Nations with respect for their languages and cultures. That's why she asked two of her companions, who were respectively a Huron and an Iroquois woman, Marie-Thérèse Ganensagwa and Marie-Barbe Atontinon, to go to the Sulpician mission at the foot of Mount Royal. Marguerite Bourgeoys thus demonstrated once again how Canadian she had become through her understanding of the territory's first inhabitants and her respect for their autonomy and their culture.
So really, at first glance, one might think that the mission of Marguerite is very different from our own. And yet, it is very similar. At the beginning or origins of Ville-Marie, there was an encounter of diversity. Indigenous peoples and Christian settlers were to learn to live together. This was a journey that really didn't happen very easily. The subsequent history bears painful witness to this. And we are deeply committed to reconciliation and righting the wrongs. Today, in a secularized society, with growing religious plurality, can Marguerite's legacy inspire us to renewal? What do you say, Denis?
Marguerite's legacy is priceless. Her vision in the 17th century was so modern that her project is still relevant in 2023. Her humanism was so far-reaching that it touches on the universal. But first, as we are here in her chapel, let us remind us of her definition of prayer, which is at the heart of her life, her daily food. She says, prayer is more than recitation. It's a conversation, a dialogue, and all of it must reach action. So that's the perfect embodiment of the Catholic Reformation in the 17th century. What leadership and the practical legacy followed, the education of girls, free school to give everybody equal chances, the beginning of women acceding to professional life. Jeanne Mance was a professional. The sisters of the congregation are professional teachers. Her breakthrough within the church is equally important. She opened a breach in the limitations imposed on women. Of course, the resistance encountered to date has reduced the role of women in the church, but her initiatives are still preparatory ground for the fundamental changes that will eventually come. And for all those who would be tempted to conclude that Marguerite Bourgeoys' adventure is only for women, I would invite them to see it as a remarkable example of partnership between women and men for a perfectly inclusive society. In other words, today and for a long time to come, there is and there will be a Marguerite Bourgeoys in each and every one of us.
My God, if I am happy enough to be in the company of the Blessed, I will continue to pray to you, not to ask for goods, honors, or pleasures, but that we follow the path that your goodness taught us, and that the Blessed Virgin observed so perfectly. I will pray for the present and future sisters, as well as for all those who contribute to the progress of perfection.
Like a seed, a small and humble mustard seed. I want to believe, with Marguerite, in the presence of a church that renews and reforms itself to give impetus to a new world. From this chapel, whose 250th anniversary we are celebrating, may a presence emerge that inspires a city of harmony and concord, where there is equality for all. That would be a true witness for our Quebec society and for our North American society. This is what Marguerite's wish was all about. And so, quickly, let us go in haste. Let us follow her.